Hey, welcome to Radicalize Me. I'm not on camera today because I look terrible, but today we're going to do another reading Reddit video. This time again from the Capitalism v Socialism subreddit. And I want to start with this post. Acknowledging people are self centered is the best way to promote socialism. Interesting. Terms like the proletariat and working class are too abstract. Most people don't care about the working class struggle as much as they hate their idea of socialism. I mean, that might be true, but using the term working class and giving the very simple definition that if you work for someone else and you get paid a wage, you're the working class, I think is a very unifying message. They want to know how something benefits them. It would be better to, do we not explain how it would benefit people? It would be better using their job title because they can directly relate to it. It would be better using their job. So using everyone's individual job title is a more unifying message, is a more like understandable message. That's crazy. That's what we do now. And it just atomizes everybody. People want to know that they can keep and or improve their current lifestyle, how they can make money and not destroy society. All the talk about fairness and equality is pointless, and things like seizing and revolution are repulsive. Well, seizing and revolution are one thing. It takes explaining, like, okay, what are we seizing? Who's seizing? Why? And who's it take? Who are we seizing it from, and why a revolution is probably necessary to do these things, like improve the current lifestyle, make people more money, and not destroy society, progress society. And fairness and equality, I think socialists talk about that stuff sometimes, but like we're not the ones throwing those words around. I think that's way more a liberalism thing that sure, we might have our own idea of and say that like, yeah, the liberal conception of fairness and equality is limited. And, we believe in our methods as a way to get closer to those things. But that's really not our main push, is those things. Neither is seizing and revolution, honestly. Like we do talk about those things. We, may or may not have those goals. I'm not going to say anything illegal. We're just trying to meet people where they are. And if you're talking about, online leftists who seem to get very caught up in the aesthetics of all of this and aren't doing a lot of real life work, then sure. But no, this is not what real socialists are talking about. Acknowledging that people are self-centered also means dropping ideas like there can be absolutely zero private ownership. People want to profit without working, and it's good for the economy. It's not. It's demonstrably not. That's something that socialists have to accept. I'm not a socialist, but I'm open to a hybrid system, and I feel socialists could implement that if they were more realistic. I think that what's good for the economy that may appear to align with private ownership is the appreciation of value and the increase of value either over time or through exchange. Even like having a market, like a stock market and stuff. China still has one. That's why, and I think we've realized this more and more through like the evolution of the Soviet Union, the evolution now of China, that you might need to like go easy, go in stages to get to where you're establishing more of a socialist system and ideally eventually a communist system. Is zero private ownership maybe the ideal and it's what we want to get to? Sure. But again, like China has showed us and like the Soviet Union has showed us, even in like Cuba, they've let up a little bit, because I think people do want to own things like home ownership, which is very high in Cuba and China. Those are contradictions with like a socialist system under a communist party. So like on one hand, I think this person is onto something in saying that like socialists should accept that people want to own things. Pushing for absolutely no private ownership might be problematic. I'm adding early on, at this stage or at the stage China's in, whatever, that might be problematic. But when they say, I'm not a socialist, but I'm open to a hybrid system, and I feel socialists could implement that if they were more realistic. We have had a hybrid system in China. They have that in Scandinavia in some way, at least like an American's conception of a hybrid system. Robust social safety nets, sectoral bargaining, like big industrial unions, and improved living conditions for people while maintaining a system of private ownership. The only issue with that, and I think they get into this in the comments here, if you leave the power and wealth of capitalists intact, they tend to want the rest of it back at some point. And that's what we're seeing in the US and UK, especially. I think in other parts of Europe too, but we're seeing a massive right-wing backlash to the remaining meager social safety nets and to, a renewed interest in expanding and creating new social safety nets. All right, this person says, everyone is selfish in terms of values. Okay. Socialists, communists promote the idea of less selfishness, more equality in terms of structure, not values. That's fair. Again, like, I don't know if we're throwing around the words selfishness, equality, whatever, what the fairness. We're not throwing those words around so much, but like, if you want to break it down to that, sure. That's fair, I think. In terms of structure, not values, right? So it's not like we're saying, oh, well, just elect the more the less selfish people, more interested in equality, or like everyone just get along. It's not that. It's changing the structure to facilitate that. For capitalists, it is of self-interest to have a dog-eat-dog world because they feel they can win the game. While for a socialist, it is of selfish interest to have a more egalitarian society so that they don't have to participate in that brutal competitive setup since the majority lose anyway. Sounds a bit like a non-story. Yeah, I mean, I think kind of getting into the conversation that the original poster wanted, because we're kind of having the conversation in more like basic, more layman's terms. Proletariat is certainly a word that maybe people don't identify with anymore, but people have some idea of what the working class is. They might separate it from like the poor or the middle class or the upper middle class or whatever, when really, like, for the most part, all of those groups can fall under the umbrella of the working class, even if there are distinctions to be made. Now, I love when the capitalists jump in here, and capitalist fanboys more likely. I don't like to call people capitalists unless they have capital. But this person says, definitely wrong. Capitalists attempt to refute any argument for Marxism by saying people are selfish, not by saying capitalism promotes a better form of selfishness. So the response, they do that to serve their selfish interests. Exactly. The argument, refuting Marxism by saying, well, people are selfish, that's just the way it is crazy, because it's like, well, if people are selfish and that is like detrimental to society as a whole, then we should try to reduce that selfishness, disincentivize that selfishness. But capitalism does the opposite. It rewards and encourages it. So yeah, no, they're not saying it promotes a better form of selfishness. They're just saying it facilitates the selfishness, and that's good because it's like natural. A lot of things are human nature, in quotes. Humans can be, murderous and commit SA and all of this stuff. We do a lot of terrible shit, but I think at least a lot of us agree, maybe not some people in power right now, but I think a lot of us agree we should discourage those things. And in some ways, we do. We have laws against these things. We have, prison sentences for doing them. I wasn't talking about how each side structures their arguments. I was talking about the underlying reality of falling into each side. Ultimately, it's all selfishness. There's no altruism. I mean, this is a little bit oversimplified. It's not that it's all selfishness, but there's always an element of ideologies, worldviews being self-serving in some way. Why wouldn't it be? But that doesn't mean it's not at all about caring about other people, and it's not at all about fairness as well. Again, like this person's trying to explain, for socialists, it's of selfish interest to have a more egalitarian society. We don't have to participate in the brutal competitive setup. And that's good for everybody to not be in a brutal competitive setup. All right, this person, here's a little unhinged. I love this. The some of these political subreddits have this user flair where you can put your ideology in the under your username. But some of these are so funny. Like, I've got a hammer and sickle here, but this person's just says, whatever it is, I'm against it. Like, great. We've got a Joe Rogan fan here or something. The thing is, if you go around asking the plebs what they want, there's a better than even chance that the plebs might want something other than their betters want for them. And the betters they're talking about here is socialists. Because they say, if you haven't noticed the utter lack of empathy coming from socialists, you need to pay closer attention. It's all about imposing rigid order on the lower classes. Government has a wonderful plan for your life. And if you question it, you'll be disappeared by the secret police and sent to a forced labor camp because we love you. They don't want the lesser people talking back. This is just, people just have some, idea in their head about communism. They have been told, some scary, spooky shit about it. And then their brain fills in all these gaps. And this is just ridiculous. I think for the most part, people subject to like the, disappeared by the secret police and sent to a forced labor camp. Never mind what's happening right now in the U.S. We're just going to pretend that we don't fucking do that. But, who is that happening to? And if you say it's just anyone who dissented, I don't know about that. I'm not saying that like regular people who were a little too outspoken against Stalin or something didn't end up in gulags. Like, of course, I get it. But the idea that it was just this full system of just random arbitrary detention, and if you say anything if you say you disagree about anything the government had done, then you just immediately, the secret police come out of the walls and take you off to Siberia. It's just a little silly because for the most part, the sort of enemies of the state in communism were people who wanted to undo the revolution. It was counter-revolutionaries and people who wanted to overthrow the state. They were people who sympathized with the outside forces that invaded and tried to sabotage the Soviet Union and China and Cuba and all these places. So do I want like a Stalin-y sort of system? No, but we got to get to a point where people are not trying to ruin the shared prosperity that socialists are trying to implement. This person says, they don't put a minimum wage increase on referendum every year. I guess because people won't vote for it anyway, right? Do you know what dictatorship of the proletariat even means? And who the F are you to call poor people plebs and lesser, yet also claim that socialists have no empathy? I have empathy for you. I used to share a similar perspective to yours before I opened myself up to views I was taught to laugh off and disregard. This person, I think this is the original poster, Compassionate Conservative, says, socialism cannot promote fairness or equality. The sixth tenet of socialism is that they cannot even accept one another. It's seriously better to be a supporter of capitalism than the wrong type of socialist in a socialist country. They go after them much harder, do they? This person says, can you list every tenet of socialism, or at least give me a source where I can research them? From what I can find with a quick Google search, the Chinese have defined 12 core values of socialism: prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, freedom, equality, justice, rule of law, patriotism, dedication, integrity, and friendship. I don't think this is what you were referring to. Apart from Stalin going after Trotsky, can you give me an example of violent socialist infighting? Yeah, I don't know. And again, like, I'm sure that stuff happened. There was a lot of paranoia again when like there's a lot of outside forces and all this stuff. And I think there was a lot of excess under Stalin and But I want to talk about this tenet of socialism thing. I thought I knew where they got this, and this is important. There's the 45 communist goals from a book called The Naked Communist by W. Cleon Skousen. Okay. A former FBI employee. Great. They're ridiculous. But this is important because I think I should probably make a whole video about this. This seems to be widely shared among the right these days. A lot of their ideas about socialism and communism are coming from this. There's this site, I found it on ethanallen.org. I assume it's referring to the guy and not the furniture company. I saw it on the Blaze too. So in the past couple of years, it's been written about on these right-wing outlets, and this is where people are getting their ideas. So I'm going to look at these because I thought the thing the guy just said, the sixth tenet of socialism, maybe came from this. It doesn't really make sense because it's eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and press. Yeah, I mean, I could see that was like more of a leftist goal, maybe when this was written back in the 50s, because there were fights about obscenity laws at the time with Lenny Bruce was a big face of this, the comedian, and George Carlin after him. But I don't know. The idea of this being like a communist goal just seems weird to me. Yeah, it's capture one or both of the political parties in the United States, get control, which, again, that's weird. I don't remember that happening back then. There were active socialist and communist parties back then. Maybe after the Communist Control Act and all this shit, maybe we started to try to take over the Democratic Party. But I love this. Get control of the schools and teachers' associations. Soften the curriculum. This is a nonsense sentence. That's why I might want to do a video about the book, because I want to see like what, if they actually say anything about this shit. But this is just vagaries, and it's the same shit that conservatives go around and repeat, and they have no idea what they're even talking about. Gain control of all student newspapers. Infiltrate the press. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and pictures. That's great, pictures. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in the media. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's cultural Marxism shit, right? This is all like cultural hegemonic shit. It's not about any of the economic goals. And that's why, I'm sure this has a lot to do with why someone from the FBI wrote this stupid book at the time. Okay, so I want to go over one more post here. This one is, what is value? All right, so they said, I have asked for this word to be defined by socialists, and all they do is obfuscate and confuse and make sure not to be specific. So, of course, it's pretty rich for a capitalist supporter to come in and accuse us of not being specific. And usually when they say you're just trying to obfuscate and confuse, it's because, we don't have like a 3-word answer to everything. But okay, they can tell one what it is not, particularly when used in more traditional capitalist circumstance, but they cannot or will not be specific on what it is. Randolfo was the most recent to duck this question. I cannot understand why they duck it. If a word cannot be defined, it isn't useful, it becomes meaningless. Words must have clear meanings. They must have clear definitions. I think the issue here is not the definition of value, but the what we believe the source of value is. Okay, this person says value, the amount of socially necessary labor time for the production of a commodity incorporated in that commodity. Socially necessary labor time, the average amount of labor expended in the production of a commodity under current conditions, including, for example, the average productivity and intensity of labor. There is this additional Marxist definition, the amount of socially necessary labor time. But I would just argue that that's kind of part of like how you get to the other definition, which was the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something, right? So to the extent that we can calculate the socially necessary labor time, when you calculate that and it's like, this is the labor time, and you abstract that to a dollar amount, you're just doing the other definition. You're calculating value and then determining value, which is the other, determining the importance or usefulness. So, okay. Such an unhelpful redefinition of the word value. The word value predates socialist beliefs and is not synonymous with what you put here. If you want to invent new concepts, then also invent new words rather than hijack the existing ones. No one outside of socialist circles follows these definitions. See what I mean? I should read a book to understand value. Yeah, you should. His first definition is not accepted by any dictionary. Again, I don't really see how these are at odds. So, like, I don't know if the issue is trying to understand each other's definitions of value. It's more just reconciling the way we determine value, right? Capitalists like to say it's about who, what people are willing to pay for it, which is fine. Yeah, you can't really escape like that element of it. If you're in a capitalist or even just a system of commerce, and Marx was just class focused and was explaining how labor contributes to the determination of the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. So that's what I took from it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Help us out on Patreon if you can, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.